All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alisha Braché, and I'm from Cosmic Gateway in conjunction with World Unity Week. And I am here with Jayse from Cosmic Origins. I'm super excited. This has been one in the making and one that I've been really excited about sitting down and streaming with you in a conversation that's very close to my heart. And I think that I'm going to learn a lot from you, as I already have. So Jayse is going to be talking about various different topics and how they come together to give us a bigger picture. But we're going to be talking about financial systems, change in financial systems, crypto, and also going to be talking about the secret space program and how all that interlinks. Talking about maybe the history of the old financial system to gain perspective of where we've been so that we can, look at where we're heading in that change and transformation, and learn a little bit about your personal journey and how you got there. So Jayse, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Alicia. It's awesome to get together like this for the first time, and we're both cosmic channels, so it fits very well. So I have a project multimedia YouTube channel mainly called Cosmic Origins, where I discuss my journey and my understandings, bringing together sort of the metaphysical with the physical, like the science with the spiritual, in my own kind of unique way with my experiences. And I guess just to kind of give a background on who I am and let you guys know a little bit about like how I got into all this stuff and my awakening experience and all that. So for me, this started back in around 2013 is when I really started going through my initial awakening experience. And it was when I just entered university and I had gotten accepted to a pretty good top tier university for aerospace engineering in particular. Like it was well known within the aerospace engineering world as being like a top recruitment university and stuff. And so I was pretty psyched on that because I knew I loved space. I always wanted to work in space, and I had that natural draw there like most of us do. And I thought I wanted to do engineering. I was like, okay, working with my hands, probably the best thing. And I quickly realized that that world was not what I thought it was. And I began learning a lot about the underbelly of, say, the black budget space programs. And it was kind of in conjunction with me going through my initial psychedelic and plant medicine experiences that were really opening my third eye and allowing me to see a lot of this stuff that, say, like my peers and my classmates weren't necessarily questioning or picking up on. And so one of the first things that I remember that really started getting me to question things was that one of the professors at the university was considered the father of the F-22 fighter jet, which is vastly considered like the best fighter jet, they say, even better than the ones they make today, better than the F-35s, they say. So he was like the main guy, and he worked at Lockheed Martin, and he worked at Skunk Works, which a lot of us have heard about. Skunk Works is Lockheed Martin's advanced aerospace division, where they do a lot of these advanced aircraft, spacecraft testing and development and research and that kind of stuff. So I already knew that that was something that, there was weird stuff going on with. But when I learned about him and then I never actually had a class with him, but I did interact with him multiple times. And I remember my friends started coming out of class one day and they knew I was kind of into this UFO disclosure, alternative tech kind of stuff. I was talking about that and learning. And they were like, hey, so-and-so, the professor, I don't want to necessarily say his name, but he has all these models on his desk of all these aircraft and spacecraft that he's essentially been the manager for. And they were like, and several of those models are black rocks. And basically the black rocks stood for black projects that he had worked on from decades ago in the 70s that were still classified. And he proudly displayed them on his desk because you could tell he wanted people to question this. You could tell this guy was older, and he was, you know, getting to this latter stage of his life, and he probably wanted to start getting people to question the realities of these things. And so he would explain that to people, like, these are classified projects that I work on. I still can't talk about them. I'm still contracted, blah, blah, blah. And then they started telling me that he was playing conspiracy theory videos of these TR3B type projects in class, which people famously knew I was talking about with my friends. I'd always be like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, I found, you know, I was talking about like T. Townsend Brown and Otis Carr, who was someone who worked with Nikola Tesla, and a guy named Ralph Ring, and a lot of these folks in the, they call it electrogravitics, and propulsion based with electromagnetics, and, you know, what they would call anti-gravity rather than rockets and stuff. And so there's famously a project that is dubbed Project Aurora, which was a US military project from the 90s, that this TR3B flying triangle is the most famous part of that project. And even now you can, they have like official Wikipedia pages where you can, you know, they have Project Aurora, and they talk about the flying triangles as being, you know, alleged and all that stuff, but they kind of acknowledge it more now than they used to. And so he was literally like playing some of these conspiracy theory videos in class, and people were coming to me and telling me about it. And that really started to wake me up to that side of things. I was like, all right, there's these, you know, technologies from the 70s. They're still classified. What's going on? Like, we're doing all these complex equations for orbital mechanics and rockets and mass flow and airflow and all this stuff. And, you know, they make rocket science out to be this really prestigious thing. And it's definitely like tough, but it's when you know that there's more going on, when you know there's technologies out there that make the rockets look like child's play, they make them look like dinosaur technology. It's you know, kind of like an electric car versus an old gas guzzler, but, you know, maybe times 1,000, because it's like that different in the technology capacity. And so that like really started to open my eyes to that kind of stuff. And then I ended up working my way up in the Aerospace Society that we had at the college. They're called the AIAA. It's the American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics. And I was the treasurer for 1 year, and then the next year I was the president. And when I was president, a large part of my role was to communicate with the local military base, which was a big Air Force base that, amongst the secret space program whistleblowers, is one that is very well known for being a secret space program type base. I knew people that lived in town that were not into this kind of stuff at all, that were seeing the flying triangles when driving by the base and all that kind of stuff. And so when I was president of this Aerospace Society, I basically was talking to the military base a lot, and I was setting up these meetings for them to come and speak with the students and do that kind of stuff. And I was also watching a lot of the rocket launches. I was going out near the base or on the base and observing the launches. And one of the first things I noticed was that the majority of these rocket launches that they were conducting were classified. And not only were they classified, but they were using their largest rockets and the largest payloads that they had, which basically just means they were sending up satellites the size of large school buses or bigger. And they were doing this, excuse me, they were doing this on a pretty routine basis, like at least once a month kind of thing.
Okay, well, that's pretty regular then.
Yeah.
Right.
So my mind is like, okay, what are they building in space that they're sending up all these launches over and over and over, that you know, no one is allowed to really know what's going on up there. And they just call them, like, whenever the media reports on them, they just call them spy satellites. But that's the extent that you ever really hear about it. And so I kind of started to dig deeper into this, and I found that the main agency that was launching these rockets was called the United Launch Alliance. And they are a private, not so heard of private rocket company, right? Nowadays, SpaceX is basically their biggest competition and taken over. And I'll kind of get into that in a little bit on what that has to do with, you know, the disclosure of the secret space program and that kind of stuff. But I was seeing that it was the ULA, the United Launch Alliance, and they were launching rockets for a very. By the way, are you hearing the little bits of static, or is that just in mine?
Yeah, no,
Okay. Let me try swapping out my headphones for these other ones and see if that helps. So this agency that they were launching these rockets for was a very little known U.S. government intelligence agency called the National Reconnaissance Office. And they're one of the big 5 intelligence agencies in the U.S. So you have like the CIA, the NSA, the Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, and then I'm not sure if the FBI is technically on that list, but there's one more. Hold on one moment.
Yeah. This is so exciting. I already learned all this new cool stuff. You can see by my face, I'm like, what?
There we go. Hopefully we don't get that little static anymore. Cool. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So so this agency, I started doing more and more research on them, and I was finding that they were a very peculiar agency. So I remember, if you're familiar with Dr. Stephen Greer, he was one of the first people that I remember talking about this agency when I was kind of looking into it. And he was talking about how they were essentially not run by the best people. And they were, their logo is an owl basically. And their slogan is "We own the night," right? Oh. So an owl, we own the night, very like occult, you know, imagery and symbolism. And of course the owl, for people that have studied the symbolism in these groups, is, you know, owls are great. Owls can definitely have positive connotations, but a lot of these darker groups use that symbology. And so I started looking into the mission patches for all of these different missions, and I was finding just the craziest stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen these mission patches now in one form or another around the internet. But if you're watching and you want to know what I'm talking about, you can look up NRO mission patch just on, you know, Google image or DuckDuckGo images. And one of the most prominent ones is, well, there's the owl one, and then there's this one that's an octopus entity with its tentacles around the earth. And there was some really, like, you know, out there slogan written in Latin that translated to, like, you know, we will preserve, or something along the lines of that, and or we will persevere, or something like that. And then there's ones with dragons clutching the earth. There's one with literally a red cow being that looks like Satan with Route 66 signs, so like 66 without the extra 6, and it looks like the devil, and he's flying up on top of the earth, and just one after another after another. And I was like, yo, something's not right here. This is not what, you know, our space agency, our space intelligence agency, you know, they're basically the space CIA. This is not what they should be doing. No one knows about this. No one's talking about it. The people in my class that are, you know, also aerospace students, they're also not really aware of this until I was bringing it to their attention. And so I was very much obsessed with getting to the bottom of that and understanding that and researching it. And it's part of what made me really jaded about staying in that industry and ever getting a job with these kind of people. And I was already very much against that the majority of where the aerospace industry students go into is like for weapons manufacturers, or some, you know, it's for contracting for the military basically. And it didn't sit with me right. I wasn't okay with making weapons or designing things that could be used to kill people. That is totally out of my hands. And then after finding out about all this, I was like, oh my gosh, there's something seriously not right. So I basically ended up, well, okay, one more story, I guess, from those college days. I ended up setting up a meeting between me and the base to talk to the students, like just a normal kind of like recruitment type, come and tell us what you're working on at the base as much as you can kind of things, and why people should go, get an internship there or whatever. And they were coming specifically to talk about what is called the X-37B Air Force space plane. And this is one that you may have seen a picture of that looks like the space shuttle, but it's super tiny. It's like the size of your living room or smaller, but it looks like the space shuttle. And it's in the media every couple years. They're like, oh, the Air Force's top secret, most secretive project, space plane, just landed on Earth after 3 years in orbit or whatever.
Okay.
And they would never tell you where it went. They would make it sound like it's the pinnacle of space technology. Like, basically look over here. Don't look at any of the other, more advanced stuff we're working on. This is the smoke screen, basically. And so they were talking about that. And one of the things that they had noted that I hadn't heard before was that they needed to, when it landed, they needed to basically have a hazmat team go out and spray the plane down for harmful radiation. And so I was kind of in a, place where I was trying to be a little maybe cheeky and like get into the like I wanted to ask them a question that I knew they would have a hard time answering, just to gauge their response. So I asked them a question I knew they couldn't give me the answer to, which was, is this some sort of nuclear powered plane that is going interplanetary to other planets, and that's why it's taking so long for it to come back? And, I'm the president of the Aerospace Society, so they might not have expected that I was just going to ask him this kind of hard question. And so the lady, she looks over to her superior in the room, and she like looks at him and then looks back at me, and she's like, "I'm sorry, we can't tell you that." And I was like, "Okay, that's all I needed to know." And I got a kick out of that. That was fun. And it showed me, it just gave me validation that like they were working, even though we of course know that they're going to other planets. They're working on stuff that's far more technologically complex than, nuclear powered engines. Like I was talking about the electrogravitic propulsion and that kind of stuff. That's really the true masterful technology when it comes to navigating the cosmos, when it's, aside from the traveling within and the kind of remote viewing astral travel, technology travel wise, the electromagnetic gravitics, which the concept is essentially like counter rotating magnets or some kind of magnetic superconductor fluid that you charge with really high amounts of amperage of electricity, and it creates this anti-gravity effect. And this is like what the Nazis were working on in World War II when they were developing these Die Glocken craft, which translates to the bell. And these are the bell engines. They were engines, but they were also craft within themselves. But they basically, from my understanding, they took mercury and rotated the mercury really fast, and then supercharged the mercury with lots of electricity, probably some kind of free energy device that could bring that much amperage, and then that would create an anti-gravity effect if they did it right. But if they did it wrong, a lot of the reports were that it would turn into pure gold, which, yeah, isn't that crazy? So when you think about all these like lost Nazi gold stories, it kind of gives a different context to it. When you think about how, this also relates back to like the ancient Vimanas of the Vedic texts in India. And the Vimanas, they were like flying churches, flying houses, and they essentially, from what I understand, depicted using a very similar type of technology that was mercury-based, toroid-based, and created this anti-gravity effect. And I technically we can get into the specifics of like, it's not actually anti-gravity, because I think what we're learning is that the Earth's magnetic field is it's not mass that creates gravity. It's like the electromagnetic field and the difference in the poles. And so if you can get the opposite resonance and the opposite magnetic effect to the Earth, that's where you get anti-gravity. So yeah, that was that was a big eye opener for me going through that whole experience. And then I ended up dropping out of university my 4th year right before I graduated because I was just so done with it. And I was in such a not good place mentally, and couldn't support, I couldn't justify continuing to do this and continuing to work at something that I wasn't passionate about and that I knew there were deeper truths to. And I ended up leaving, which was one of the best decisions I ever made. I'm really glad. And it was
Comment.
kind of in,
A
what was that?
quick comment. In all, pretty much all the interviews that I've done throughout World Unity Week, that is one of the most common things I've heard people say, is that they went into this profession because of passion, and right at the end they were like, no. So yeah, sorry, continue it. I mean,
I,
that's
I,
to me.
I think that's like a lot of our divine purposes, you know, like I don't regret it. And I think most people don't regret it, that they needed to go into these fields to get the understanding of whatever it was that they were meant to shed truth and light on in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Sorry, I don't
that's
want to
good.
interrupt, but yeah,
Oh no,
continue.
yeah. Oh, please, like it bring up anything you want to say. So it was in the following years that I started to kind of realize more of what was going on when Space Force got introduced. And I kind of was in a pessimistic place of like, this industry is pretty, you know, effed up. Like, I don't know if there's much hope for it. You know, that was, you know, right after they kind of canceled the US space programs as well. And the space program in general in the US was really starting to diminish. You know, they stopped the space shuttles, and then we were putting up astronauts on Russian rockets, and it was just looking really bad for America and space. And a huge problem for this was um, it was a cover up for unchecked. There wasn't oversight over the space community in the United States. So all of these defense contractors and intelligence agencies and everyone that was playing this game, they were basically doing this without a leading oversight, basically telling them what they could and couldn't do. So a lot of these, you know, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, all these big defense contractors we hear about, they have all these really secret research and development programs that have created their own black budget secret space programs, which is something I know like Tyler and Aaron talked about when you interviewed them on that side of things. So I won't go into like that too much because I know they already talked about that, but they,
I'm so, what comes to mind, I love how every interview is interweaving in some capacity, because tomorrow morning I'm going live with Rebecca Rose, who
mm,
um, yeah, is a whistleblower, and she talks about Lockheed Martin and how her involvement through her family line. So yeah, all these seeds are
nice.
coming together for me, and it's great because it's like World Uni Week is painting this much greater picture through everyone's individual expertise and participation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to watch hers tomorrow. That's sweet. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, particularly from Lockheed, start to come out, like family members of people that worked at Lockheed, that are starting to kind of talk about the various things that they've done there. And yeah, but so basically there was all this naughty stuff being done by these groups. You know, the extent of trafficking in many different forms, um, interstellar trade, which is something we'll kind of get into with how that relates to like finances and cryptocurrency and stuff in a little bit. But what I really started to pay attention to as well is when the Space Force was created, and there was all this backlash from, you know, the people that weren't in support of that. There was a lot of backlash trying to ridicule it, trying to make fun of it, trying to seem like, oh, this is just a silly thing. We don't need this. The Air Force has got it controlled. You know, they even made that Netflix TV show Space Force with what's his name? The guy who plays Michael Scott on The Office. I forget his name. Steve Carell. Steve
Oh,
Carell. So they got like, you know, a bunch of big actors. They made this Netflix show called Space Force, make it look like an absolute joke, and really try to amp up like that side of the story. And in my opinion, it was because Space Force was created to create oversight over these various communities and contractors which had gone unchecked for so long and were doing all this mischievous behavior and stuff behind the scenes. And so Space Force actually ended up, that base that I was telling you about actually ended up becoming a Space Force base. It was a Vandenberg Air Force Base, and now it's Vandenberg Space Force Base. So they literally took over the base itself in a way, which is one of the most prominent that I've seen working with that stuff. And then there's SpaceX, which is kind of the flip side of things. So what I kind of saw was that, you know, whether you want to call these folks the white hats or the you know, the light workers out there that are working in the military intelligence communities and things like that, whatever kind of name you resonate most with, I believe that these people had this kind of plan set up where Space Force was implemented on the government military side of things to create oversight, and SpaceX was created to basically steal the competition, to take the competition away. And so when SpaceX came out, they really gave a huge competitive like competitive competition. They gave huge competition to the United Launch Alliance, which is the one that was launching these rockets for the NRO. So all of a sudden, the United Launch Alliance was not as prominent as they were before. They weren't making as much money. They weren't doing as many launches. They weren't securing as many contracts. And now the ULA still do launches, but it's so much less from what I've seen. The majority of the launches that we see now are SpaceX for Space Force, and also sometimes for the NRO in conjunction with Space Force. So I believe that Space Force came in, basically created oversight over the NRO. And then one of the big pieces of evidence that I saw for this was how the mission patches changed for the NRO. So there was actually like a particular mission patch that was for NRO launch 111, and it literally looked like it should be a patch on like the Galactic Federation of Light or like on someone from Star Trek. It was so beautiful, and you know, you could say it was full of light codes. Like it was extremely benevolent feeling, and it had a language written in Middle Earth language from Lord of the Rings that basically said something like, we will be strong or something like that. But it was like such good vibes compared. And then there were a few other patches that came out around that time in Sense 2 that were also like depicted like a Pegasus and like a warrior slaying a dragon and like things like that. So the symbolism just changed 180, and I was like, okay, that's a really good validation for everything I've been observing with this.
So when did that change happen? Like, because you've just given a whole lot of information, and I probably will interject at this point and say, like, in this segment, Jayse and I are going to be talking a lot of information that may be like really new to some people, and so for other people, it'll be putting the pieces and the dots together. So encourage you to go and check out your YouTube channel and your work, because then people can digest it, you know, much easier, and go into deeper aspects of that.
Yeah.
So I'll just put that out there for everyone. And likewise, I mean, when I, you know, obviously I connected with you through your wife, Alexis, but I have been following quite avidly your YouTube channel for quite some time, because you teach me so many things in every episode. And I'm just like, oh my God. And to me, it just talks to me. And I may not, and I'll say this for everyone watching, I may not necessarily understand the language, but I can feel and sense, you know, and I can pick up on the energy when you talk about it. So even though I don't have the greatest context, I have some, but it's like when you talk, I can feel it. Like I can feel the energy and the tonation in your voice and things like that. And I think what happens is that even though we may not comprehend it on an intellectual level, there's a higher aspect of us that knows it. Like when you were talking about one particular rocket and you said the name of it, I don't know if I've heard it, or maybe I have, but I felt like there was a resonance there. I knew that, you know. So like back to my question, when did that change happen? Because I know you talked about the patches with like having the owls and all that when you first started uncovering this. When did you start to see that shift and change in that, like just on a timeline to
Yeah,
to get an overview of like how things are changing in real time?
I'm looking up right now when that patch for that launch um, was published, but I started noticing this right around 2016,
I,
2017,
I think you're
when
good.
Trump came in, and then Space Force was created, and then there was a lot of stuff going on in the months around that inauguration too, particularly like CEOs and key figures being arrested on a scale that we've never seen before, like record amounts of CEOs being arrested or replaced or stepping down or whatever. So you could sense there were big shifts going on at that time too. And then, yeah, 2016, 2017, and then, amping up until now, I've been really feeling that. And then that mission, I think that was 2017 as well. Um, Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was 2017, but I can't find it right now. But yeah.
That's okay. I was just curious about the the timeline overview just in that. And before you said it, I kind of knew the answer intuitively, but I just wanted to hear it from you.
Yeah. Yeah, so right around those couple years, and then especially since SpaceX has been really securing a lot of these government contracts and taking over from the United Launch Alliance. And I remember we even had the United Launch Alliance CEO come speak at the school too, and I met him and shook his hand, and I was really intrigued to find out that he was a Knights Templar, and that he wrote a whole book about being a Knights Templar and how the Templar ways have helped him be a business leader, and a lot of things like that. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And I used to kind of throw a lot of the Templar Mason type connections in one bucket and kind of lump them all in as being together. But something that I feel like I've realized more recently is that there are factions within each, and that there are positive groups and negative groups, and we really have to be discerning in um, you know doing the research, figuring it out, but also being intuitively tapped in, having your third eye tapped in. The Like you were saying, when you're hearing me talk about it, like you can feel it, and like that feeling, that's the true communication, that's the telepathic communication, and the words just kind of help guide everything into place for the brain, right? But
Yeah,
that's why you can like picture, when I said the rocket or whatever, you could like picture it. And I think applying the same thing to a lot of these different world leaders or prominent peoples is a really important thing to do for our discernment. So
couldn't agree more with you there. Yeah. And I think it's like, especially when people start to go down rabbit holes and start waking up to this information, and it's very quick. And I think it's part of it. I see it as part of the phase, but you when you start to dive down rabbit holes, and you become quite what is the word I'm looking for? Outraged, perhaps, depending on what rabbit hole you go down. It's very quick to
yeah.
have a jaded perspective and like want to just taint everyone with the same brush in that. And then you kind of move
Yes.
beyond that and then realize that, it's not all dark and it's not all light. There is both. And yeah, so I think that's a great analogy to apply to every aspect of life. But I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think that's another awesome thing about you, is that you have all this information, like intellectually based and experience and life experience, but you're very tuned into your own intuitive guidance system as well. And I think that makes someone really well rounded to watch, because you take from both sides, the intellect and the intuitive, and bring it together. Um, so
Thank you.
I did have a question. I'm like, I have a million questions. Um, hmm, I know, yeah. Actually, speaking about intuitive hunches, what is your overview of where things are at now in terms of like, you know, how you're talking about like the darker programs privately owned and then the other ones, and to sort of overthrow in a sense. Where do you feel that we're currently at now? I mean, especially right now at the end of June, with everything that's happening in the mainstream media and this possible, just, I mean, I've been out of the loop. I'll be honest, I've been out of the loop. I only hear bits and pieces, but where do you feel that we're at with that? And also with this upcoming disclosure, I'd like your
Yeah.
own personal perspective.
Yeah, thank you. That's really fitting for this, that the UFO disclosure and everything that's going on. So I feel like when I know on the surface level, and this is what you were kind of saying a couple minutes ago, I know on the surface level, a lot of times when people just look at what's happening in the world right now, it can feel very dense. It can feel very dark. It can feel very much like we've been led off, the golden timeline, or the timeline that we've been trying to put ourselves on. It can be confusing, like when we look. And on the flip side, when I tap in internally to what the divine truth is and what we are experiencing, I feel like this war has already been won. And I feel that very strongly. Like, this is already done. Like, the true darkness has had the head severed from it. And now there's like little bits of wriggling pieces of darkness that are trying to just escape the light, but there's no cohesive structure of power anymore. And that doesn't mean that like some of these smaller pieces aren't going to try to wriggle their way back up into power and, do false flag type events and things like that. But I really do feel that on the deepest levels that this war has been won, and that what we're really dealing with now in this, fight is the programming of the collective consciousness and where people think we're at. And a lot of it is a lot of the truther community that has turned into these kind of doomers, as people are calling them, where they're people that are trying to wake people up, they're trying to help people, but inadvertently they're kind of digging us a deeper hole energetically and projecting these concepts that don't necessarily apply to us anymore, in terms of like the dark having all this power. And we can look at the vaccines or whatever and point out things that we that seem really overwhelming and dark. But even with that, I really feel like we're on a good timeline. And so to connect that with the UFO disclosure and what we so for people that aren't familiar with this, essentially a little more than 6 months ago, Congress petitioned the Pentagon in the United States to release a full report on a series of specific questions that they had regarding the UFO phenomena. And that report everyone was excited because it was supposed to come out in June. It did come out in June, but only the classified version. And now they are working on the redacted version, the declassified version for the public. And so I remember even just like a month ago, I was listening to, a couple different channelers, and they were saying that same kind of thing, that there would be, it was supposed to happen in June, but that July would really be the meat of when we started to experience this. And it's lining up that that's going to be the case, because now they're saying July is when that public report is going to come out. So there's this is something I've been talking about in my videos lately. There's kind of two sides to this, and I'm seeing people kind of butt heads in the UFO and truther communities, spiritual communities, on what they think is really happening. And I'm not really married to either of these ideas. I'm kind of just keeping them both in context and understanding that I think there's truths to both. And so the one is that this is a partial disclosure narrative, would be the one theory, that this is something that those kind of words we've heard for years within various circles. Partial disclosure essentially meaning that we're not getting the full cookie. They're only giving us a slice of it and pretending that's the whole thing. And I definitely think that there is a degree of that happening. Obviously, that's been happening for a long time, where they've just dribbled little bits here and there. And so one thing that a lot of us have heard for many years is that the ET card, so to say, would be the last card that the dark powers played in their attempt to gain back control, right? So we've all kind of had this in our collective consciousness. We've all been expecting this. For those of us that have heard this, we've been kind of knowing that this was going to come. And there's a lot of different theories around this with Project Bluebeam and potential staged alien invasions and things like that. Personally, I don't feel like those are timelines that are accessible anymore. We don't want to access them, obviously, but I don't think that those are timelines that are going to have any probability of showing up in our reality practically anymore. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, but I don't feel in resonance with that now. Could still be partial, disclosure, false flag. And one of the things that kind of points to that is that they are saying officially now, the one thing that they've been able to publicly say about this report is that the US military is saying that it is not our craft, that it is not US craft, and that we don't have the capabilities of building any crafts like this. And that means it's either a foreign world power like China or Russia, or it's ET. And a lot of the mainstream media has actually been leaning towards it being ET rather than, a foreign power. And I think we all know that it's not a foreign power. It's that's probably the last likely possibility. It's either us, or when I say us, the United States military, or actual galactics. And so there's that side of it, the discerning side. We got to be careful of this potential fake narrative where they're going to say it's ETs and whatever they want to do with that. Obviously, they're hiding the fact that the US military has access to these technologies. I don't personally believe for 1 second that they don't have technologies like this. But on the flip side, I think the other perspective to look at is that what is a bigger form of disclosure for the masses? Is it that, the United States and the allies have this, technology that could revolutionize our planet, which is awesome? Or is it that there is consciousness, advanced life, galactics beyond this planet, and we're disclosing that? And to me, that seems like the bigger picture over the military has this. Both are true, but which is like the more prominent disclosure? And I think it's the ET one. So you could argue that we are on, the golden timeline fast track to bringing out the ET narrative. And I think that, kind of merging the two into what I'm feeling is that the intention was to have it be a partial disclosure, false flag type of event, and that this was co-opted in very much the same way I feel like the pandemic was co-opted, where I believe, with the pandemic, that the powers that were did want to have it be a much more intense, scary event. There were supposed to be, millions of people that didn't make it, and then, the vaccine and all that. And on this side of things, I think that they wanted to put out this narrative, but that it was co-opted, and now the light workers, the white hats, are using it to actually bring forward this deeper level of disclosure for us. And I resonate with that. So, going back to your question of like, where are we at right now? What's happening? I feel like there is a competing narrative at play, but ultimately I feel like the truth is going to win out over that competing narrative. And we don't need to necessarily categorize this whole thing as being like a fake, disclosure, because I think ultimately it will lead to the answers that we're all looking for and know that are true, that we're looking for, the world governments and the like to disclose to people.
I totally agree. That makes me smile when you say that, and I resonate when you talk about that. And I love how you give such in-depth of, there's all these different schools of thought, and there's all these ideas and possibilities, and then feeling into what's the timeline that we're going to land on, I guess, is the best way I can call it. But I don't know why I need to go back a little bit. I can't even remember what you were saying. But what's sparked in my mind was an interview that I did last night with Judith Kussel from South Africa. And she said just this one thing at the end of the interview, and she talked about how in July last year. She puts a date on it, but she goes, she believes that that was the timeline of when the old world ended and the new world like birthed itself. And she goes, what we're living now is a holographic play out of the old world just wrapping up. Like you know,
And that's like almost exactly what I was saying with us. We're fighting
thank
the
you. Yeah, that,
programming now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
the head of the beast has already been severed. Even I've heard some people literally refer to, you know, like going back to the octopus entity with that thing on the mission patch, the Yaldabaoth entity, if people have heard of that, which is the giant tentacle type being. I've heard that that being has literally had its etheric head severed, and then so it's like, yeah, totally.
I couldn't agree with you more, because I'm trying to cast my mind back to sessions I was doing last year, around like 12 months ago, or maybe a little less. And I was getting all that imagery, like when I was working with people who had like really dark stuff in their life and connected to them. And I was going up, 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 and I was seeing this energy force that had tentacles and like working on pulling people or disconnecting them out of that.
Wow.
So I love how it's so validating. People say little things, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that lines up with that. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I just needed to bring that back, because I think what you said was really important, because you said sometimes certain communities, as they're working through their own individual process, but it impacts the collective field. And sometimes they can be kind of weighing energetically a little heavier. I think that's where we really need to bring light and consciousness to it, as like, am I playing out something that's within me? How is that impacting others? How is that impacting the collective field? Because we are working as one, or at least we're trying to get the best result for everyone in all those realms, and you know, financial and disclosure and stuff like that. So I loved when you were talking about that. That really deeply resonated for me. And I guess part of what I want to bring into World Uni just before we hit July, I was thinking about this before we sat down to the interview. I was like, I still don't understand the energetic ripple effect of bringing all like minds and great minds together, to have this like whole repertoire of videos of all these different facets that kind of coming together. And then we hit July, and I was like, people could be going back to this for months, possibly years, to, you know, for the masses to get their head around potentially what's going to drop. And I don't know what that is, but it's a feeling behind it, you know. And we've been talking about this for years, but it's like we're finally at that point now where we're seeing it play out in the physical realm. And that's so exciting. So
Yeah.
exciting. And that's a testament to the hard work of people like yourself and Alexis, and you know, all in our little areas and what we've been working towards. So yeah.
Yeah. And you.
Gets me excited.
It does. Yeah, I really feel like, you know, in this next year, we're going to start getting a lot of more information in the public sphere around ETs, and it's us who are going to have to be a large grounding voice, because you know the media narrative so far on this has been fear. Be afraid, be afraid. You know, if we make contact, it could be the end of the world. Blah blah blah. So this is where people like us and people listening are really going to have to step up and provide, you know, a balanced, grounded, aligned understanding of what we already know to be true. And I think this kind of information is going to blossom into a whole new sphere of people who are interested in it, and it's gonna change the world.
It really is. It really is. I'd like, before we go from disclosure to crypto, I'd love to hear what you have to say, or your perspective on the other side of this as the information comes through. How does that impact and change the world, from your perspective? I mean, there's so much that it will, but from your perspective, how does it change the world? And what are you most excited about coming for?
It's good
Like,
questions.
yeah.
Okay, so how do I see it changing the world? For one, it's gonna it's gonna give people a whole new sense to come together. Um, And I think initially the elites wanted that for the opposite reason. Like if you remember that Ronald Reagan speech where he talked about an outside threat bringing people together, but he was coming from the context of a threat. I think in the same way, on the flip side, on the light side, um, the unity of having the of humanity knowing that we have another, we don't even have to say greater or higher intelligence or whatever, but just another species out there that actually cares about us and is looking out for us. It's going to change people's innate feeling of, I think, loneliness in the world, in the universe, on a very personal level. And it's like, I see so many science articles that are just trying to say, well, why would ETs ever be interested in us? We're so boring. We're so stupid. Guilt, guilt, guilt. Humanity sucks. Nobody wants to play with us, basically. And we've internalized that on like a deep level of like, oh yeah, we suck. Humans suck. I suck. Blah, blah, blah. What's the point? Whatever. So I think it's going to rewire and reprogram us in a positive way to have this like security within our heart and within our root chakra of like knowing that there is other beings out there that love us, that are watching us, that are here to assist us, that have assisted us in the past many times from destroying ourselves and many other things. And so on that level, I think it'll change things. I think it'll give us a greater purpose as on the macro level for humanity to be a better humanity, to create things that are good for not only humanity, but for our cosmic neighbors, our galactic neighbors. And then, of course, all the fun technology kind of things that may or may not come with that, but probably will. Although I do believe that, like, we're going through a phase where we're redefining what technology means to us, and becoming non in resonance with certain kind of technologies. Like even just my phone, I have a really hard time being on my phone. I over this past week especially, I just find that I'd rather much just sit outside in nature and listen to the birds than scroll on my phone. And I'm like trying to balance, how is that going to, be in balance moving forward with us potentially getting new technologies that are going to give us more, empowerment in our journey in the cosmos and everything. And I think that we're going to be kind of redefining technology when we do get these disclosure along with this of these other technologies like med beds and these anti-gravity technologies and these various healing technologies and things like that. They're going to be different. They're going to be technologies that are in resonance with our field and not that are draining our field, right? So I like to picture like, airports, instead of going to an airport and feeling like it's the most vampiric, stressful experience where it's just like everything is radiating radiation and you're just like, I feel fried from all angles. Imagine if spaces like that or malls or whatever had Tesla-like technology that actually radiated a harmonizing frequency into the space, or if your phone radiated a harmonizing frequency, right? And like right now, every time I am holding my phone, I feel like I have to, like, I don't know, hold a crystal afterwards to kind of rebalance the energy in my hand, because my hand kind of just feels funny and numb after holding my phone for a while. And so I think it's going to, on that side of things, it's going to redefine our relationship with technology and hopefully pull us away from this transhumanism tech timeline and towards a bioharmonic, not bioharmonic as in putting stuff in our bodies, but in resonance with our bodies. And then personally, what I'm most excited about is I am really eager to, and we can talk about, how this will work out with financial reset type of stuff in crypto. But once we do get that kind of, once we get that kind of wealth, redistributed back to us, I really have a big interest in creating my own aerospace company where I can take all these things that I basically didn't like about what I was taught and, bring in people, the brightest minds who do have the awareness of these kind of technologies. And then I really want to give humanity a chance to explore our origins, both in, on, and off the planet. So like being able to give people, say, commercial space flights to go look at the ancient temples on Mars or on the moon, or go to the inner parts of the earth where there's, you know, whatever is there. Like, and, you know, people obviously have different opinions about what exists and maybe even the shape of the earth. I know a lot of people are still not totally in resonance with, but it'll also give us a way to kind of definitively prove to us what is out there, get us all on the same page, and then relearn what our history as humanity is and what that means for us going forward.
Split second before you said that, visual just dropped into my head, and I saw those like tours, only the thing that we can compare it to, and I was like, oh my god, you're really going to do that? Like, I just saw that before you said it. Can I be your first customer? Because
Sure. I'll
right
put you on
now
the list.
Venus is really in my field. Like, can you take me to Venus? I want to check out what's there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's going to be so many things to explore and relearn, and it's very exciting. And the opportunity to like help with that in whatever way I can is really a driving force for me.
Yeah, incredible. I look forward to the years unraveling and see you succeed and accomplish all that. That's
Thanks.
going to be amazing.
Definitely put you on the VIP list.
Don't forget me. I wonder if you can do a specialized tour for me. You know, I'd like to go home to Arcturus for a little bit and just chill and, you know, see my peeps. And then, yeah, I have a couple of, like, I've got a list of where I'd like to sort of bounce around to. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And who knows, maybe you won't even need this kind of technology to do that. Maybe you will be able to do it just with your own vessel.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do that too. And I think that we're getting to the precipice now, at least experiences I've had in probably the last 8-9 months, of such tangible bilocation. I'll call them episodes. I don't know what else to call them, experiences. So I think
Me too.
we're moving to that.
I've just to kind of throw this in there, on that like biolocation note, I feel like I've been personally, and also people I know, receiving a lot of I guess you could call them progressions instead of regressions. So
Yep.
instead of past memories, things from the future, and been getting a lot more like kind of downloads and imagery and like memories of that kind of thing lately. And a lot of it has to do with the Space Force from what I've seen. And it's like, you know, to kind of go more into the esoterics of it. I've had visions of this being basically like what you could call a fourth density Space Force type group, where we are multidimensional. We have these abilities, these telepathic abilities, various other kinds of, you know, superpower type abilities, but it's like somehow connected to this Space Force. And it was like a very positive thing, as opposed to like, you know, people who have had regressive memories of secret space programs where it's, you know, traumatizing and healing. And I think they're both very real, but it's very interesting to see more testimonies and accounts of people talking about this kind of stuff coming from the future. And it's a good sign, I think.
That gets me excited knowing, and like touch on something that Tyler has said recently. It must have been the interview that I did with them for World Uni Week, and he was talking about how there's been all these whistleblowers that have talked about the negative programs of the negative secret space programs. Everyone come forward because it's been necessary to bring that darkness into light. He said, and I think we're going to have a lot more, but then what we're going to see is, I'm going to call them representatives of people coming forward talking about being involved in more of the positive space programs. And I do believe that my journey has been linked in with that, and I'm still unpacking and understanding that as I go along. And I think that's exciting, because I think a lot of us are, you know, we're all multidimensional beings. It's just how far along we are in the awareness of that. And because of that, yeah, some of us are feeding information from our future self to this now moment to help us navigate through. So All right. Oh man, I could talk to you forever about this stuff.
It all ties in.
It all ties in. Shall we move into crypto and talk about the financial systems? Because I know that's another massive topic, and that's something that you've been knee deep in researching and understanding for a while now. And I think, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I think that you have one of the most deep understandings from a very neutral perspective of taking in the entirety of it all to help people like myself understand how crypto comes in to it and how this change is taking place. So I'll let you take it away. I'm not going to speak anymore.
Definitely. So no, please, like throughout this, if you have any questions, comments, please don't hesitate to jump in, because it is a lot, and people generally do have a lot of questions, because including myself, because it is a very dense and foreign kind of topic. But to kind of, the bridge that I kind of tie between, say, these space programs and cryptocurrency and the galactics is I believe that this technology, this, we could call it blockchain technology, not Bitcoin, but blockchain technology, which is the underlying technology behind all cryptocurrencies. And just to kind of give people a brief explanation of what that means, all the blockchain means is that you have a completely transparent, public history of any kind of system. So I kind of picture it like I picture the 3D and how frames of 3D end up creating a timeline, right? Like if you take a bunch of still pictures and you put the pictures together, it creates a movie. Or if you take like one shot of your 3D life and then, it becomes us moving through time. So in that same kind of respect, the blockchain is snapshots of time and data that are added onto each other. And each block is one moment in time. It's like one frame of a moment, and then the next block, and then you have a chain. And they all are coded together so that you can't manipulate the data or change anything on it, so that it basically has to be completely transparent. There are private blockchains, but that's kind of a different thing. So I really do believe, and this has been backed up by a lot of channelers and remote viewers and things, that this technology was seeded here on Earth by galactics. And that it, as with all technology is kind of a neutral thing, and it can be used for light or dark. And I think that part of what this is doing is it is introducing us into the interstellar galactic trade. It's kind of an official disclosure of our already present ongoing trade deals and systems that we have with other planets, that I would assume mostly are third density, just to kind of specify third and, up. I think that most of the groups that, say the secret space program is trading with are likely third density other beings. Because once you're fourth density, once you have more of an energetic type body, you don't really need to do that kind of galactic trade type stuff, right? Yeah. So this is even like, arguable as being negligible moving forward if we're going to be going through the shift. But I believe that it's like, we don't know when the shift is coming. It could be, the solar flash type event could be tomorrow, could be in a couple of years, could be in 100 years. All of that is still just a drop in the bucket compared to overall time. So we don't really know. But I think that this is being set up to start to engage us in these kind of intergalactic trade opportunities. And I've actually heard from a couple channelers that like the specific names of some of these cryptos come from the names of the planets that they're from, which is a really fascinating, thing to think about, right? And so you look at names like Cardano or Iota or Algorand, or there's even one called Stellar. There's a lot of names like that sound like they're, not from Earth. Yeah, right. But that aside, so when I first started getting into cryptocurrencies, I was very much in the judgmental kind of Oh, this is part of the NWO timeline. This is part of the digitization of money to take away our power to create a one world currency that, you know, is not based on gold or silver or anything tangible. And that was just my thoughts on it. And then basically Spirit started giving me a series of synchronicities that were telling me to invest in a particular project called XRP. And XRP, I was just getting tons and tons of synchronicities about this, to the point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to get some. And I got some with, you know, the stimulus check that we got and everything. And I didn't really think about it too much after that. Kind of just drifted out of my mind, let it go. And then, you know, over the next couple months, Spirit kind of starts nagging me again, like, hey, you should probably start looking into this more. Like, it's good that you have some, but you should know why. Like, you should know what this is. You should understand it more. And so I started doing more research into, you know, what the difference was between Bitcoin and XRP and Ethereum and all these other cryptos. And one of the things that I kind of found was that among the empathic community, myself included, I think that, and this could, you know, this is potentially done on purpose, but we associate Bitcoin with all of cryptocurrency.
I know.
So like,
I did before your work. Yeah.
yeah. And I did too. Like, I kind of just was like, crypto, okay, Bitcoin. And then I would tap into the energy of Bitcoin, and I was like, oh, that feels sticky and gross and not something I want to be involved in. And I never really looked beyond that. And so when I started doing the research, I was finding that just like with everything else, like we've been talking about, there's a war going on within that group itself. And there are factions of light and dark, and they have different intentions. And it is a, you know, neutral technology space, like kind of like if, are you familiar with the law of one material, like the raw material? So that's one of my favorite channelings and book series in general. And one of the things that they note is that the Manhattan Project that created the atomic bomb and essentially atomic energy as an idea was seeded here by benevolent galactic forces, and then taken into the wrong hands and exploited and abused. And that's why they created the bomb. But it was intended to help set us free in terms of energy. And so in a very similar way, I think that cryptocurrency was seeded here, like that, the blockchain as a concept, and then the dark took it. And, you know, so for instance, Bitcoin was obviously the first cryptocurrency. It created the idea of a cryptocurrency. At least that's what they tell us. And it was created by an anonymous figure or group of figures, and they go by Satoshi Nakamoto. And it seems most likely that Bitcoin was created by one of the world intelligence agencies, like probably the CIA or the NSA, probably American. But one of the things that I found was that this concept for essentially what would become the XRP coin that Spirit was telling me to look at, the concept for that was created back in the late 90s, way before Bitcoin was ever around. And it was created by a guy named David Schwartz, who worked for the NSA. And so on the surface, it seems a little like, okay, NSA, maybe not so good. But I apologize for the crackling. I'm not sure why it's doing that with the other headphones, but
That's all right.
So he basically created this idea for what they called the distributed ledger technology, which was taking a series of different components, nodes in a network, and using those nodes in the network to validate themselves and to create a consensus and to create essentially a network out of that. And so one of the things that I've also kind of come to understand is that the NSA is actually starting to look more like the good guys in the scenario over the CIA, and that the NSA was created with the intention of exposing a lot of the corruption within the CIA, and a lot of the mass surveillance was created with the intention of getting surveillance on these key figures who were involved in, you know, really horrendous crimes against humanity. And so it just started to add up one by one. Spirit was showing me all these things one after another. And so Bitcoin has kind of been commandeered, even though it's a decentralized technology, it's been commandeered by the dark. And today, 75% plus of the Bitcoin miners, who are the ones that are running. So with Bitcoin, you basically have to have all these computers. It takes physical energy. That's not the same for all of crypto. That's particularly for like Bitcoin and similar. They call it proof of work. It needs physical energy and computations, and it's really inefficient and terrible. And so China owns the majority of that. They own the majority of these miners, and it's like 5 people control like the vast majority of that 75% within China. So of course that is controllable by, you know, the dark powers there. And so realizing that, I was like, okay, wow, yeah, there really is like this kind of war going on here, and there are positive projects that are being built to kind of overcome these negative projects. And XRP was the one that really jumped out to me. And so to kind of break down how this could benefit us moving forward, and like the difference between, say, a project like XRP and one like Bitcoin, you know, going back to kind of the empathic state, if you tap into Bitcoin, Bitcoin kind of has this ego of being like the king. It's got
Mm.
this like persona of being like, yeah, I'm the, you know, I'm the ish, and like, you know, everyone's got to bow down to me, and like, I'm the best, and no one else is going to be around. I'm the coolest kid on the block, basically.
Mhm.
And everyone else is like the underdog. And so I believe that the dark wants to inevitably take Bitcoin and make it into that one world currency. So this is kind of a breakdown in the polarization of the ethics of where cryptocurrency can go. And it's
Mm.
like, is it going to serve the people, or is it going to serve the elite, right? And if you have a one world currency, if you have one coin that does everything, that's clearly serving the elite. And they've launched a very similar kind of thing in China very recently, that is their central banking digital currency. And it's not technically a cryptocurrency, it's just the digital version of their dollar. So they have complete surveillance, they have complete control. It's not good for the people. It's the one coin to rule them all kind of thing.
Mm.
With XRP and similar projects, they essentially require an ecosystem of coins to operate. And so what that basically means is, instead of having, you know, like just the dollar do everything, you have different coins that serve different utilities with different purposes. So with Bitcoin, its only real utility is just kind of a store of value other than gold or the dollar or something. It doesn't really have like a utility to it. It's very slow. The fees are, you know, pretty expensive. It's not that great. With XRP, what I really see happening, XRP is set up to be what they call the global uh, bridge currency. So it's essentially set up to be an integral part, the plumbing of what you could call the quantum financial system. And that you know, the quantum financial system is kind of a buzz series of words. Like, people, you know, some people like that, some people don't. Some people, because there's a lot of people out there that say quantum financial system that maybe are aligned with different things. I kind of loosely say it just to refer to the fact that this is a quantum, a nearly quantum speed currency technology. And so I want to kind of lay out like how this could benefit us as the people, and how it's going to liberate us, you know, in moving forward, and creating our own businesses and our own, all that kind of stuff. So a kind of simple example I give to people is, if you, okay, for one, these ecosystems of currencies will support physical assets. So rather than competing against gold and silver, they will actually enable and support gold and silver and cash and things like that. And what a bridge asset means is that it is used as the transfer system. So essentially how this would work is, hypothetically, you know, 5-10 years down the line, banks are kind of back to being actual reserves for the people. There's no more cartel banking dynasties that control all this money, that can print money, yada, yada. You have banks that actually serve as reserves for keeping your gold or your dollars or whatever. And so say you wanted to say you have a physical bar of gold, and like, say I wanted to send it to you on the other side of the world, right? And I want to get right now, if I was going to try to, get you gold or anything like that, I'd have to fly it to you, right? Like, there's no practical way. Even within the United States itself, I think I heard um, an analogy that, like, even within California, if you were going to try to get $500 from San Francisco to LA, the quickest way to do that would be to fly it there, because even the wire transfer and everything is like, it's going to take too long. So that's like extremely inefficient. That can be exploited by the dark powers, all that. So we need something that's going to allow us to get value from A to B really quickly, as simple as like an email, right? Wouldn't that be great if we could just send an email and send however much money, from $1 to $1 million? It's like that, right? No legal authority, complex regulation system that's privatized that can exploit you or tell you can't do something because you don't have enough credit or whatever. And so in this example, like, I want to send you the gold. I would go to my bank and I would give them a gold, and I would say, I'd like to send this to my friend Alisha. And so what they would do is they would take the gold, put it in their reserves, and they would transfer that gold into digital gold. And then from digital gold, they'd put it into a coin or a crypto like XRP or something similar. And then they send the XRP. It gets there the whole thing settles in 2 to 4 seconds. And on the other side, they're able to pull that bar of gold out from their reserves in, a few minutes, depending on their own system. And then you have that bar of gold. And so to go from a system like we have now to like that would revolutionize things.
Oh my god, I'm speechless, Jayse. I'm speechless right now. I've never heard you put it in that context before. And there's so much I could say. I'm so glad that you've cleared that up and sort of set the stage to give people a deeper understanding, because like you, and probably like most of us, like, I don't understand Bitcoin. When I feel into it, it doesn't feel right. And I love how you shared just, such an in-depth overview, and then broken it down in simplistic terms that someone like myself can understand. So,
Yeah. And so go ahead.
no, you go. You go.
I was going to say, to kind of take some of the scariness out of the digital aspect of it too. I think it's like important to note that, the majority of people's money right now is in banks or something similar, right? And if everyone were to try to cash that out at the same time, it would be a disaster, right? Like, you couldn't, like, they don't have enough reserves for everyone to pull their money out at the same time. So total brain fart. Where was I going with that? Brain fart. They don't have the reserves to pull out that money. So your money is basically just ones and zeros in an account, right? And if, say, especially in light of all the cyber attacks that have been happening now, if there was a cyber attack on a bank, they could just change the ones and zeros in the account, and all of a sudden your savings is now nothing, or whatever. There's nothing backing it up of value. So the point being, we're already on a digital system, but it's a corrupted digital system. It's a digital system that has nothing backing it. So to go from this current system to a system backed by blockchain cryptocurrencies that are benevolent, it gives that digital backing and security like a meaning and an actual value. And so, like, the current system, the way that they send money from large bank to large bank is called SWIFT. And it's been around, you've heard of SWIFT?
I've used it a few times.
So so that's like what the banks use to send money back and forth. And SWIFT is they don't actually settle the payments. SWIFT is just a messaging system that is basically like a note that tells the banks how much they owe to each other and whatever, but it doesn't actually settle the payments. And so the company that is behind the XRP cryptocurrency is one called Ripple. And Ripple, their goal is to basically replace Swift with this system. And it would allow us to actually have real time, international settlements, either peer to peer, person to person, or bank to person, or bank to bank. It would allow us to have that instead of just relying on the system to do things in its own time and whatever. So that's a really big part of it too. And so some people might be listening and maybe they're a little bit familiar with Ripple or XRP. And one of the big kind of, I don't know if complaints is the right word, but questions that come up is that a lot of times people call XRP the banker's coin, because it's kind of, as I said, it's intended to, Ripple is intending it to replace the current banking system. But the way that they're doing it is that they're advertising it to the banks. And so a lot of times it gets called the banker coin. And a lot of the pro Bitcoin people will really hate on XRP for reasons that are understandable, because they think Bitcoin is truly decentralized. And they think that this is like giving the power back to the corporations and the banks in a way. But then when you really start to go to this deeper level of realizing that, Bitcoin is not really decentralized because China owns the majority of it. So they can actually change the coding on the network because they own the majority of it. And then my kind of counter to why it's not the NWO banker coin is that I believe that it's a Trojan horse to get into this system. And it's basically like, it's this quantum technology that's going to come out regardless. And of course, the dark wants to use it and the light wants to use it. So I believe that they are pitching it to these banks and these dark groups in a way that gets them on and gets them interested. But ultimately, it's going to create an even playing field for all of us. And it will ultimately get rid of the need to even have a traditional banking system. And this isn't just XRP. This would be like the whole ecosystem that kind of comes along with this, and free market type of things and new technologies developed. And then, do you have any questions on that?
I don't have any questions on that, but when you're finished, I'd like you to give it's ringing in my head. Just a very brief overview of the transition from like the Babylonian kind of from the energetic perspective.
Yes.
Yes.
So we've gone from this place, like you said, the Babylonian money magic system. It's been a slave essentially run system, and it's gotten increasingly worse, over the past couple hundred years, when we went from having actual physical assets to then dollars that were supposed to be backed by things, and then they're no longer backed by things. And so that system, the system of greed and physical cash and things like that, was one that was meant to keep us enslaved. And then we had all of these private entities, which we essentially gave our power away to, like banks and brokers and all these financial middlemen and all that, who were profiting off that kind of system. And not to say that everyone involved with that is evil or bad, but for the most part, the energies behind that were. And so, yeah, so energetically, we're moving into this space where the finances are going to be now decentralized and for the people. So one of the big projects that I'm really interested in that is going to be launching in this next month or so is, coincidentally called Flare, and it's called Flare Networks. And this is one that I've been paying attention to, and that Spirit has been guiding me to look at for quite some time. And they haven't launched yet, but they've been really hyping up what they're all about and what they're going to do and how it's going to change the world. And essentially what Flare is going to do is it's going to decentralize and unify all of finance. So It's going to allow us to essentially become our own banks. It's going to allow us to have decentralized loans, right? So can you imagine going to, instead of having to go to a bank to get a loan and they get to decide if you're worth it or not to them, you can do a decentralized loan through a network like this. And, it doesn't matter on that. Like there's security built in, obviously, so that, they're not giving random people millions of dollars or whatever. But it's decentralized. And so with that, there's going to be decentralized real estate. So imagine buying real estate where you don't actually have to go to a realtor, and it's, you can have your mortgage paid off with the decentralized loan where you don't owe the money to anybody in particular. It's just in the network, a decentralized network. And then this network itself is its own social governance system that's run by the people. So essentially, by owning, say, the Spark token for this Flare network, that's their token. By owning the Spark token, you have a governance vote in the direction of the network. So if enough people get together and say, hey, we want to change this thing, we're all going to vote on this and it's going to change it, right? No banker CEO gets to have any sort of say on that. And it's really going to revolutionize the way that people have their streams of income moving forward. It's going to provide, a lot of people are talking about like universal basic income, right? And the idea, which on an energetic level, I really believe in, like we should, as human beings, we should have a certain amount of value that is just inherent to every being that we should be able to work with. But the kind of debate has been, should governments do this or whatever? And ultimately, I feel like when governments do it, it ends up being corrupted because they're doing it for their own reasons, right? They're doing it to create more control. So these kind of blockchain cryptocurrency systems are going to essentially open the doorways for content creators, for artists, for anyone who does anything to make money off of it and to monetize any aspect of your life. So if you're a gamer and you play video games all day, there's going to be a way to monetize that and make a passive income from that. If you're a YouTuber, a podcast creator, content creators like us, we'll be able to create, there's these things called NFTs now, which stands for non-fungible token, which is basically a uniquely minted, unique crypto coin that is assigned to a piece of digital or physical art. And so this is going to revolutionize everything for like music artists. And speaking of that, there was recently a bunch of prominent artists, including Alex and Allison Gray, who do the paintings, and I think Paris Hilton, who's like a DJ now, is part of this, and a bunch of electronic artists and stuff. They got together and made this collective, and it's literally called 888 The New World. And you guys can go look this up. The website is 888, the numbers, tnw.com. And their promo video is basically like this angel flying through the auroras and then through the outer space and like going through all the planets. And it's really good vibes. And they're going to be running their website off the Flare networks. So what that means is that they are allowing artists, or not they're allowing, they're creating a space for artists to own their own products. So instead of having to pay, whether it's a music label, record label, or an art gallery or whoever, like ridiculous percentages of what you're making, I think what this website does is 8% is all they take of everything, and you own the rights to your music, you own the rights to all that, and it's all because of these NFT cryptos. And so this NFT thing, people are going to start hearing about this more and more. I even saw an ad for it on my local gas station pump. They're like, NFTs are, changing the world. Yeah, it's becoming like a really big thing now because it's giving the power back to the people, and no more private groups that get to control people's creative works and in private intelligence stuff.
This must really be coming into the collective field because once again, the connecting the dots. But me and my dad talk about this most mornings, right? For various reasons. And I've always had a keen eye on the shifting of the financial systems. I'm a life path 8, just to give
Nice.
context around that. So it's kind of embedded in me in like empowering people to their full potential and their entrepreneurship, and to ultimately bring the best out in people, their gifts and talents, and to be accredited for that financially in what they should be in their worth. I see that as one of the biggest changes that could possibly happen on this planet. To be able to connect people with their purpose, their mission, their artistic abilities, and then to be paid for it, and then they can have a life where they can, flourish. Ultimately, that's how I see the future. But getting back to what I was saying, like obviously me and my dad were talking about what you just talked about, and this is all kind of new for me. I've heard bits and pieces over maybe 3 or 4 years, but my work's quite different, so I only hear bits and pieces from people like yourself and other friends. And my dad was like probing me on very specific details, and I was like, I don't know the details, Dad, but I think it works like this. It's describing, I didn't realize it was such a prominent thing that's literally dropping right now. So I'm I'm buzzing. I'm excited. And you totally need to talk to Todd Medina.
Mm,
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the end of the interview I did with him a couple of days ago, but he has this vision of what he wants to create for social media platforms moving
nice.
forward. Yeah.
I
And I
should
think
talk to him.
we've all kind of tapped into this intuitively, because I think we all know in the future our work will be come together in that way. And we'll be
Yeah.
working through these platforms or through these projects together.
Yep.
And those of us that are kind of intuitively, we get those hits decades in advance, and it makes no sense. And then the closer we get, it's like, ah. So thank you, Jayse, because you've just given me that moment of everything coming in together. Wow, just amazing. I know that we're like gone over time now, but I do want you to wrap up in your conclusions, because I don't want to leave it just there. But before we do that, just once again, encouraging people to connect with Jayse. I will put all the details in the description box and in the comment section, so you can go follow his work on his existing platforms for now, because by the sounds of it, it's all going to change. But where you can get a hold of him, connect with him, follow his work, and also your up and coming event. So maybe I'll get you to conclude, and then if you can just share a little bit about um, where people can find you and the family of light gathering conference that you're putting together with Alexis. This is so exciting.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it is. So, yeah, to kind of wrap that up, one last thing I wanted to mention about that whole flare and, the synchronicities of it connecting to the solar flare and all that was a big presence, like in the synchronicity I was getting. And the thing that really tied it all in with me with, the space program stuff we were talking about and the crypto was there's a trailer for Flare Finance, which you can find on my YouTube channel. I do an analysis breaking down every scene of this trailer. And in this trailer, it every time I watch it, it just gives me the craziest goosebumps, or God bumps, I'll call them. And in the trailer, it basically depicts us as an interstellar, interplanetary species with very advanced space technologies, going to other planets, going through wormholes. It depicts a solar flash type event, like literally, and it's all running on these flare networks. And so it was insinuating that like the future space programs and things would be running on these decentralized networks. And it blew my mind. And in that trailer too, they had a very prominent displaying of the 17th letter of the alphabet,
No,
which I was like,
I
wow,
did
like you just straight up put that in there. And I was like, wow. And yeah, like Trump's name is even in it. It's funny, like very slyly, very, very slyly. But yeah, that really connected it for me with the whole space program and crypto and how this is going to really liberate us and bring us to new heights. And I think with with like blockchain technology, we're only just starting with what it's going to do for us, because the financial side of it is just one piece of the puzzle. So like another really useful part of blockchain is that blockchain will be used to secure our elections in the future. The blockchain will be used to allow us to have fair, untampered elections and similar types of governance processes that can't be corrupted, because it's all public, it's all there, and it's very secure. So yeah, it's really exciting just to look at the opportunities that lie ahead of us. And like the driving point with the crypto for me is that, to be discerning about what you're looking at in the space, to know that Bitcoin doesn't reflect the rest of cryptocurrency, and just be becoming more aware with this on our own personal levels, of like figuring out what we do, where this kind of technology can help us with whatever our passions are. So, like I was saying, whether you're an artist or content creator, or even if you work for an office job, like there's some way that these technologies are going to help liberate us and bring us personal income and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very exciting for me. And I think that we're on a very positive path for Earth, and continuing to look for the signs of that positive and not dwell in the negative, to stay in the heart-centered space despite the projected fear that's out there, and to really be pillars of light for all of the upcoming shifts that are coming, and to help those around us through that, is really important. And I think it's probably the most important thing right now.
It truly is. I'm so glad that you wrapped it and tied it all together in that nice little neat bundle of all the different tangents that we've been on, but how it all interconnects and relates back together, and bring it back to ourselves, and you know what we're guided to, just as you shared your story of how you were guided to look down and invest in, and look at these different systems, financial systems that are now being launched, and how that's tied in. So encouraging people to tune into their own inner sense, and be guided by the synchronicities like you were,
Mhm.
and see where that takes you into your own abundance, liberation, and oh my goodness, Jayce, I just can't thank you enough. This has just been just one of the most profound conversations I've had. And I just thank you for your wealth of knowledge and experience, and to bring this, on alive. It's amazing that people can watch this conversation. But before we
Well,
wrap
thank
up,
you.
before we wrap up, um, Sedona, July, end of July. I don't know what the exact dates are. I think it's
Yeah, it's going to be July 23rd to the 25th in Sedona, 3 days. It's the event is called the Great Family of Light Gathering,
Mhm.
and we're going to have a number of speakers, vendors, nightly music. The theme of the event is centered around the activation of our mind, body, and spirit. And so each day is dedicated to either mind, body, or spirit. So Friday is mind. We have a lot of people discussing the personal awakening experience and disclosure, and a lot of these kind of topics we were talking about. Tyler and Aaron from Journey to Truth will be speaking there. The Kate Awakening will be speaking there that day. Alara from 1 Foot in 5D, if you guys know her. And then Saturday is going to be our spirit day, the more galactic cosmic information, and pulling that down. And we're going to have speakers like Rion and Alexander from Sedona, who are pretty well known in a lot of places, the great guys, good friends of ours. And Matthew Mornian will be speaking that day as well, a couple other people. And then Sunday is body, and that's where we're going to ground it all back down into the body, personal health, breath work, wellness in general. And we have people like Troy Casey, the certified health nut, and my friend who has a channel called Sexual Kung Fu, who talks about cultivation of our sexual energies for our manifestation and well-being. And then we're going to have a cosmic dance party, nightly music. And yeah, it's going to be fun. And if you can't make it out, like, if you live on the other side of the world or something, we are going to have a live stream available. So the live stream option will be there for anyone that can't make it. And we also have cryptocurrency discounts available. So I really wanted to like bring that into it and give people as well an opportunity to get a really good discount and engage in that kind of new world of finances and getting comfortable with it. So I also offer personal one-on-one crypto coaching if
Love
anyone
that.
is interested in that.
Awesome. I'm
Yeah.
gonna
So
connect.
if
I've already
anyone,
got a couple of people that I need to send your way because I wasn't sure if it was an ongoing thing. So okay, cool. We'll put that
yeah,
down in the description too.
thank you. Yep. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And we hope if you're interested in that, hopefully we'll see you there.
Yeah, cool. I'll definitely be there on the live stream.
Yeah.
And I look forward
I know
to
you can't make it out in physical.
damn it.
It's a little much.
Especially when you talk about the dancing. I just want to move my body and dance, but that's all right. There'll be time for that in the future.
Yes. Yes.
And all the hard work that we've all done individually will pay off because we'll get to have more and more of these gatherings, I believe, and being able to come together from all sides of the planet. So once again, Jayse, just thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching. Please connect with his work. It's so inspiring, it's so inspirational, and it really paths where we're leading as a humanity into freedom, liberation, and abundance for all. So much love, much respect for your work, and yeah, look forward to connecting again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alisha. It was such a pleasure being on.
All right, see you everyone.
Bye, everybody.